Imagine having your hands and feet tied, following which you are drowned. Imagine having ropes tied to a concrete block around the neck. All these sound too brutal to be true, but this is exactly what serial killer Oba Chandler did to his victims. Oba Chandler is an American serial killer and mass murderer who was convicted for the murders of Joan Rogers and her 2 daughters. The bodies were found floating in Tampa Bay, Florida. According to the autopsy, the victims were alive when they were thrown into the water and left to drown. In 1992, the case became high profile, and everyone was looking for the killer after evidence of his handwriting was found in the victim's car. Oba was finally caught and incarcerated for 17 years before he was executed on the 15th of November 2011. A few years after his death in February 2014, Chandler's DNA was found in Ivelisse Barrios Bigares, who was found dead in Coral Springs, Florida on November 27, 1990 after being sexually assaulted. Chandler was involved in various crimes from a very young age. At the age of 14, he would often steal cars and was even arrested 20 times as a juvenile. He's also been involved in other types of crimes such as burglary, armed robbery, kidnapping, and loitering. Joan Rogers, with her 2 daughters Michelle and Christy, headed to Florida from their family dairy farm in Wilshire for a holiday on the 26th of May 1989. Joan was reported to be lost on the 1st of June right after she met Oba, who had offered to take her and her daughters on a cruise at Tampa Bay. Chandler knew that they were not locals and decided to take the opportunity of luring them into trouble. So Joan and her daughters decided to spend an extra day in Tampa, where they checked in to the Days Inn in Route 60. They had gone to the hotel's restaurant at around 7:30 p.m., following which they boarded Chandler's boat to see the sunset. They were dead by 3 a.m. the next morning. It was on the 4th of June 1989 when the bodies were found. The first one was found under the Sunshine Skyway, while the other bodies were found floating off the pier in St. Petersburg and at a point 200 yards to the east. All the 3 bodies that were found had a rope tied around their neck and they were naked below their waist. This was a major implication that the victims were sexually assaulted. When the bodies were found, they had decomposed a lot, due to which identifying them was quite hard. A week after the bodies were discovered, Joan's husband reported them missing in Ohio. The bodies were finally identified through dental records. While looking for the suspects who committed this murder, a piece of evidence was found in which there was an address that was handwritten. This handwriting matched Chandler's handwriting, hence getting him caught. This case was a huge one. A number of tips that the police were getting from the public were a lot. Due to this, and a wide variety of other factors, the case was unsolved for 3 long years. The most relevant tip that really helped the investigation go in the right direction was when the description of a similar rape case involving a 24-year-old Canadian tourist had taken place somewhere near Madeira Beach 2 weeks prior to the Rogers murders. Chandler was arrested for triple homicide on the 24th of September 1992. The biggest piece of evidence that stated that he was guilty was the handwritten directions that he had scribbled on a brochure and given to the Rogers. Even the description of his boat matched what was written on the brochure. There were some of the primary clues that helped guide the investigation in the right direction toward the right suspect. Chandler's handwriting was posted on billboards so that people who knew it could help out in identifying whose it was. A former neighbor of the suspect happened to see this billboard and sent in a copy of a work order that was written by Chandler. The handwriting on the brochure and the handwriting on the work order underwent a handwriting analysis in which the samples matched. There also happened to be a palm print on the brochure which also matched that of Chandler. Right when the billboard started to appear, Chandler packed up his bags, sold his boat, and left town with his family. He and his then-wife moved from Downton Avenue in Tampa to Port Orange during this time. During the investigation, the police believed that there was a second suspect involved in these crimes. However, as the bits of evidence poured in, it was found out that Chandler had no accomplice in this crime. In fact, even when he was in jail for 17 years, no one really came to visit him. Many even believe that Hal Rogers' brother John could have been involved in the murders. John was serving jail time for the rape of a woman when the murders took place. It was even found out that Michelle, Joan's daughter, was sexually assaulted by John. However, the charges were dropped as she was reluctant to testify. According to the police's prior belief, John had planned out the murders when he went to visit his parents a month prior to the murders. But once the police realized that John could not have hired a private killer contractor, he was dismissed as a suspect. Even Hal was established as a suspect for a short while due to the fact that he applied for bail to get his brother John out of prison. During this time, it was found out that Hal had withdrawn $7,000 when his wife and daughters were missing, which got the police all the more suspicious. On asking the reason for his withdrawal, he stated that he had withdrawn all that money to look for his daughters and wife after he felt that something had gone wrong. In fact, the whole reason Joan and her daughters took this trip to Florida was to distance themselves from the ill talk that their locals were indulging in with regard to the assaults of Michelle Rogers by her Uncle John. According to Chandler's testimony, he did encounter Joan and her daughters only to give them directions, following which he claims he never saw them again. During the night of the murders, Chandler made 3 ship-to-shore telephone calls from his boat, though he claimed that he was alone that night. When he was questioned why he returned back home late, he stated that his engine would not start, hence causing the delay. He further backed this point by stating that he had gotten in touch with the Coast Guard and the Florida Marine Patrol to aid him with his issue. However, they did not respond to his call. However, on checking the calls that the Coast Guard and the Florida Marine Patrol received, none came from Chandler. In addition to this, a boat technician who testified at the prosecution had stated that the fuel line in Chandler's Bayliner boat was directed upwards, hence such a gas leak as the one he mentioned was tenable. If a leak were to take place in this boat, all the fuel would be spewed up into the air, and the boat and the gasoline would have dissolved the adhesive of the duct tape Chandler had apparently used to fix the problem. One of the witnesses in this case was a woman named Judy Blair, who testified that 2 weeks prior to the murders, Chandler had raped her on the same boat after going on a trip with her near Madeira Beach for a boat trip on Tampa Bay. Barbara Mottram was with Blair that night. However, she did not accompany Blair to the boat trip. Blair had also stated that when she met Chandler that day, he had stated that his name was Dave Posner or Dave Posno when they had met for the first time at a convenience store at Tampa. When Blair spoke up about the crimes committed to her, other witnesses stepped in. One former employee of Chandler even stated that he would often find him boasting about dating 3 women on the bay on the night of the murders. Many believe that the calls that he made that night were to his wife to explain his absence, and maybe to even establish an alibi. Chandler's daughter Crystal May Sue had also testified, stating that her father was scared of being caught due to how involved he was with the 3 murders of women. The remains of Joanne, Michelle, and Christy were laid to rest in their hometown on June 13, 1989. On the 4th of November 1994, Chandler was found guilty of the 3 murders and was sentenced to death. Prior to that, he spent almost 2 decades at the Union Correctional Institution, following which he was on Florida's short list of executions. 3 days after his death, on the 25th of February 2014, Chandler was tied to yet another murder case. His DNA was found on 20-year-old Ivelisse Barrios Bigaris, who was raped and strangled in Coral Springs, Florida on November 27, 1990. This leaves us with a big question looming over our heads. How many people did Oba Chandler murder? Thanks for joining us on this journey into the murders committed by serial killer Oba Chandler. Stay tuned to find out what happens next in the case after it goes to trial. Please like and subscribe for more updates in this case and other true crime stories.